Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. Welcome to the Sip and Saga Society, where we cover histories, mysteries, and just any story worth telling. Every week, we get together and tell each other history stories that either happen in one specific year or fit a theme. My name is Karina, and this week we are covering the year 1779. Your other host for this episode is Randi. Joining us today, we also have Greg. Yay! The gang's all here. We miss Christina, though. We have stories to tell her. But, Randy, what are you drinking? Inquiring minds must know. But also,
Mm.
is it Dr. Pepper?
Well, of course, I have a Dr. Pepper amongst the options. I have my standard Dr. Pepper and a cold water, but I was feeling really, I don't know what it was, my taste buds, my period, but I just really wanted a Sprite. So, although I don't know what it's called now. Starry?
Yeah, the Sierra Mist.
Okay, that's what I
Sorry.
have.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have. And it's delicious. I'm really happy about it.
Good. I'm glad you have options.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Greg.
I just have the Voodoo Ranger IPA, which I think I've had before. But like I told you all earlier, my kids are here and I'm tired, and I just bought a 12 pack. So, you know,
This is how it is now.
this is what gets me through the insanity of a 7-year-old.
Evan is hanging out with his niece and nephew, and he's like, children are exhausting. And I'm like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
this is good for you, though. I think he never hangs out around kids. I think it's great for him.
I had a huge fight with my 9-year-old today. And then 30 minutes later, when he was calm, we were able to solve the problem and we were best friends again. It's like whiplash.
Yeah.
It's emotional whiplash.
So both my kids' birthdays are in March. They're like about a week apart from each other. So my son's turning 13 tomorrow,
Mm, that's
which I feel like is a
exciting.
big, yeah, it's a big
You have
year.
him for his birthday. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fun.
How is he 13?
I know, right?
It's sad. I'm tired of the children growing so quickly. Anyway, I was craving a beverage, and I was introduced to these a long time ago, and I went and hunted them down at the local store. It's a Steigl Radler of grapefruit flavor. They literally are 2%, I swear to God, like 3%, 2.25.
They're really good though.
So they're basically juice, but
Yeah.
they're so good. I love them. The only drink I got for free at a bar was a Steagall Radler. Now I've associated it with good things. Anyway, it's delicious. And it has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about today. The year is 1779, and I picked the most obscure man ever, Claudius Smith. So every week, Randy has a plan, and I just stumble into something. And for the year 1779, I chose to talk about a man named Claudius Smith who died on the gallows on January 22nd in 1779. Claudius was an outlaw of the New York colony. He was born in Brookhaven, New York in 1736, and by 1741, he moved to Orange County, New York. So in the early Revolutionary War time, around 1775, the area surrounding the Hudson River was full of turmoil. To the north, around Fort Montgomery and Newburgh, were George Washington's Continentals, and closer to New York City was the British Army. The area between the two groups was considered a neutral zone. So it's like there's a group on the top and a group at the bottom, and in the middle, it's just like people live there. The neutral zone makes it sound safe and cozy, but it's often not. This place was a wild mess. And I really enjoyed this story because we typically see history through the eyes of rich white guys who are in charge. Like we know all the really big names, but we don't know the small people. Like we know where Washington was, we know where the British were, but like who was living in this in-between zone? Yes, it is often the little man who suffers the most from those big rich people decisions. So, anywho, often, like we see even today, there's like two sides, especially when it comes to political parties. And at this time, there's the Tory side, the people who are loyal to the British, but they had people called Skinners coming after them. So the Skinners were typically the Patriots. But if you're a patriot and support the American endeavor, you had people known as the Cowboys after you. And that's why I picked this story because I was like, what are you talking about? How was there a cowboy hung in 1779? What are you even talking about? I feel like it sounds like a bunch of people just playing dress up in the middle of this place. But this was a really dangerous time to live in that region. Historian Joshua Het Smith's account of the situation really paints a picture of what this time was like for the people living in the neutral zone. No one slept safely in his bed. Many families hid themselves at night in barns, wheat ricks, corn cribs, and stacks of hay, and on each returning day blessed their good fortune that their houses had escaped the flames. The composition of these predatory gangs of cowboys was loose, including confirmed Tories, British deserters, runaway slaves, and Indians. Their number was indeterminate, and their taste in thievery were undiscriminating. So it's not like there were like these really like these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. It's like everyone kind of sucks and they're all taking stuff from each other and they're all fighting each other and they're lighting everything on fire and it's just like whatever. Yes, Randy.
Oh, I don't have anything to say. I'm just
Oh,
listening. It
okay.
sounds really hedonistic, that I will say.
It's just like we just love murder and kidnapping and
I'm
taking what we
like
want.
trying to think when the Wild Wild West happened after
It's after the Civil
Civil
War.
War.
It's like
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
1866 to like 1888,
Okay.
thereabouts.
Yeah,
Because I
it's
was
like
like, that's what
forever
you're kind
from
of
now.
describing, though.
Yeah. But you know what I was gonna say is like it actually like tracks with a lot of the new stuff I've read on the revolution, like academically paints it as like both a civil war and then also focuses on the sort of like the terrorism and the violence that goes on, like the fighting between loyalists and patriots. Like there's people who like are like you said like murdering each other and terrorizing people and stuff during this. It is kind of like a lawless time.
And
I
you don't really think
also,
about it.
no, you don't. I also love that you're covering New York, and I'll be talking about a different part of New York tonight. So it's interesting to me, like thinking about what was happening at that time in another region of the state. Like it was really a tumultuous zone, really. New York was not settled.
It really was a wild time. And I like had never thought about what other people were doing. I don't know why when I thought revolution, I just American Revolution, I immediately just think Paul Revere just like riding around. Like that's all he did. Like that's what I in my and then there's like a couple battles and that's it. Like you don't think about the people living their everyday lives. Anywho, so what about Claudius? He was the leader of the Cowboys. He was known to be daring and, quote, wicked. They allegedly called him the Cowboy of the Rampos because they were known to steal horses and cattle. They would steal the horses and the cattle and then sell them to the British in New York City. The Cowboys made their headquarters near modern-day Monroe amongst the caves of Ramapo Mountains. They put boulders in the front of the openings of the mountain to create a barrier against storms and wind, some of which remain in place to this day. The caves were large enough to hold men, horses, and cattle, with a spring running along the mountainside to provide water to the inhabitants of the caves. And also, what a convenient natural shelter. Also, what if you didn't know there was a bunch of cattle and horses and people and you're just hiking or walking somewhere and there's just a bunch of cows? It would freak me out. Anyway, on October 7th, 1778, Patriot Major Nathaniel Strong was dead. So he is for the quote American side. And according to the testimony of 13 citizens, quote, a company of armed men had broken into Major Strong's house around 1 or 2 in the morning, and 3 men shot at him while others attacked the house. Major Strong's wife was heard saying, Major Strong's wife heard him say that it was Claudius Smith before he was shot. And also 13 other people saw him there. Claudius was never officially tried for murder, but he definitely had the capacity to do it. His reputation was known throughout Orange County, with author Charles E. Stickney describing the inhabitants of the region as, quote, never sleeping peacefully in their beds for fear of getting their throats cut before morning, because Claudius and the Cowboys were loose. The murder of the major evoked protests from all the general population, with Governor Clinton proclaiming a reward of $1,200 for the apprehension of Claudius Smith and $600 for each of his sons, Richard and James. His wanted poster described him as 7 feet tall. So even then, it's always
That
the
couldn't
tall
have been
people.
right.
I
That could not have been right.
They're like, he's scary, guys. But yeah,
The Slender Man has come.
Well, anyway, Slender Man or not, he runs off to Long Island. That's where I go when I'm trying to get away. Then one day, a Major Jesse Brush, who was an anti-Tory farmer who had land in Long Island, came to take care of business on his property. And there he saw Claudius. So he goes back home to Connecticut and talks to his friend, Mr. Titus. And they were like, yeah, let's go capture him and then we can get the money. So in November of 1778, they left Connecticut in a boat with 3 other men and made the trip to Long Island. And at approximately 11 p.m., they made it to the house where Claudius was staying and asked the landlady if he was in the house. She said he was, and she's like, but I think he's asleep. I can go wake him up. And they were like, no, just let us know which room it is. And so that she was like, he's upstairs. And they made their way up there and seized him. And he tried to get out and he tried to fight and he tried to get his gun, but they held him down. And there was like 4 or 5, like there's at least 4 of them. And they held him down and they bound him with a cord. Like he could still walk, but they forced him under their control. The next morning, they sent word to Governor Clinton that Major Brush had Claudius in his custody. And Governor Clinton ordered the major to turn Claudius in to the sheriff of Orange County and his guards. And on the 20th of November, Major Jesse Brush was paid for apprehending and securing the body of Claudius Smith. I just hated how they described that, like just the body. And he was still alive, but it's weird.
Wait, but I thought you only got paid for the body if they were dead.
No, they
Wasn't there like
captured
an
him.
old-timey like reward system where
Well, he didn't have to kill him, but he received him. He got Claudius Smith, the person, the body, brought him back. I don't know. That's how it worded it
okay.
in quotes. It was very official. So they put him in prison and they gave the guards orders to shoot him if he made an escape attempt that looked like it might be successful. Because he had previously escaped the year before and they didn't want to take any chances with him. If he had any chance of being able to leave, just kill him. And on Wednesday, January 13th, 1779, Claudius was taken to trial and was accused of theft for the burglaries of the homes of John Earl, Ebenezer Woodhouse, and William Bell, and still never officially charged for murdering the major, but everyone assumed he did it based on the 13 eyewitnesses. He was found guilty, and on January 22nd, 1779, he was marched to the improvised gallows made from a noose dangling from a tree. People crowded the area to watch the man who had terrorized them for so long meet the consequences of his actions. Claudius's mother had always told him that he would likely die like a trooper's horse with your shoes on, because he always had a habit of finding trouble. I didn't really fully understand that, but I guess it meant like you don't even have time to take off your working shoes.
A trooper's horse?
That's how she said it. I don't know.
I got nothing on
I don't get it.
I was like, you do have to shod your horses, but I don't know if you take the shoes off before they die. I could ask a horse person, I
I'm
guess.
assuming it's like if you get shot at in the middle of work, is how I took it. I don't know why.
But isn't a trooper a military person? So wouldn't it
Well, I
be in
could
the
see
middle of
that.
war?
Like, well, yeah, if you're at war, you don't get to take your shoes off before you die. You just get shot
Hmm.
at, I think was the
The
sentiment.
premise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, and then so before the tractor took off, because he had to get up on a tractor to get the noose on, he took his shoes off because he didn't want to prove his mom right. It was, he had his convictions, Randy. But three of his sons were also part of his gang. One of them was hung with him. The other one was hung in Goshen, New York, and the last one took over his gang when he died. It stays in the family. The tree he hung from was known as the hangman's tree until 1920, when it had to be taken down due to rot. I picked this story because although Claudius Smith was a menace to the patriots of the neutral zone, he was known as a Robin Hood to the area. He was generous with the poor and typically targeted the wealthy. But also he did kill people, so that's not good.
Did he kill bad people?
I guess it depends on who you are and whose side you're on.
See, if I were a serial killer, you guys, I would be the kind that was like passing judgment on people. I can already tell. I
You're
know
like
myself.
Dexter,
Dexter.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, are you bad? Okay, you're the one.
You're like, you deserve it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can get with this. I might enjoy it that way.
I had a weird, like, existential crisis with this story for myself
Oh,
because
really? Why?
I was like going through it and I'm like reading this story because it's on the side of the Tories, right? Like it's on the side of the British supporting people.
Mhm.
And I have never read something from that perspective. And then it made me be like, why? Why am I uncomfortable with this? You know? Because I was like, like in my brain, part of me is like, well, the Americans are the good guys. And then the other part of me is like, are they? And then I'm like,
That's fair. I mean, like, so I'm like I've told you a little bit about my big research project, but I'm doing a biography on this minister who no one's ever heard of in Western Massachusetts, and he's a loyalist during the Revolution, you
Oh,
know. So I was like just I'm reading his diary and everything. I'm just like trying to understand why you would, like, okay, like why does this guy support the British Empire, over the Patriots? So it's like
right.
it's interesting to try to like shift your perspective like that.
Yes. And I guess I've never thought about my patriotism because I don't typically think of myself as like super America supporting.
patriotic. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
And so in this way, it's like I feel like I'm on the opposite side of the field, you know?
I feel like we often slip into like saying like we did this, like we
Hmm.
are those people back then. I remember that was like a thing all the time. Like when I was in high school and stuff, we would all like when we're talking to the teachers, we're like, "Oh yeah, like we did this thing," like assuming we're the Patriots.
Right, because we've already picked a side before even. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like I've never thought about it. I feel indoctrinated.
I mean, they do it on purpose.
I know. Yeah, it was very weird for me. But, I like that they thought of him as a positive guy. I think regardless of who you are, people aren't going to love the murdering and the burning of houses. Even if you give enough money to people, it's still not great. It's still not good. Anyway, that's Claudius Smith, the cowboy of the Rampanos or whatever.
That was interesting. I didn't know anything about him. So,
Me either until like
yeah.
2 days ago.
I wish I could see a map of
Oh,
the
I have
neutral
one.
zone. Okay. I think you should post it. I really want to know where that neutral zone was. It's
Let
just kind
me.
of weird to think. It's just really, that to me was the most interesting part of it. Not
No,
that
me
he
too.
wasn't interesting,
No,
but
he is interesting, but like understanding like the space is very, I think, pertinent to the story,
Yeah.
honestly.
I was gonna say, so there's this really famous John Adams quote when like asked about like how many people supported the revolution. He said he thought it was like 30% supported the Patriots, 30% supported the British, and then the other 30% just wanted to be left alone.
Yeah,
Like,
except they
it's
couldn't because the Cowboys were around
yeah,
and
yeah,
so were
yeah.
the
I mean, there are people
Skinners.
that are just like, just keep leave me out of it, you know?
Okay, so over here is New York on the bottom.
yeah. So for
Eh,
everyone who's listening, what we're looking at is the Long Island Sound and the Hudson River where they make a Y. Keep going, Karina.
So basically, the British were more around the Long Island Sound area, and Washington's people were more towards like northern um, Hudson River area near Newburgh.
Hmm.
So much. So the neutral zone would be between these two areas
Oh, like R Westchester,
and
Rockland
Rockland.
area.
Hmm.
Okay, interesting.
It feels like a lot of chaos in kind of a smallish
Yeah,
space.
because I'm going to be talking about like Western New York, like and parts of Pennsylvania. So I'm on the complete opposite side of the state.
Well, this is what was going on this side.
That seems like not a lot of territory to have such a buffer zone like that.
But remember, this is a time where most people weren't leaving like 30 miles out of their birth space.
That's true. That's true.
They don't really travel a ton. Anyway, that's 1779 for me.
Okay.
It's great. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And yes, the map really does help out kind of see. I am going to post it on our Instagram and our website and Facebook and YouTube, but that way you can see. It's really not a lot of space. It's like, I don't know, how many miles is that? Half a state away?
I mean, honestly, it looked like 10 miles. That's what I'm saying. It was probably like I don't know. It really did only look like 10 to 20 miles. I don't know. Greg, you look at maps way more often than I do.
I have
Oh,
no
it's okay.
idea. I don't know New York's geography that well.
Me
Mm,
either. And also, but also, okay, New England is not that big.
No, it's not.
no.
I was reading diary entries from the guy that I'm writing the book on last week, and he was like, he'd be gone for like a week going to Boston. So, you know, going from Western Massachusetts through the center of the state over to Boston and like doing some things for a few days. It took him about a week to
Yeah.
like go there and come back, you know?
Yeah, I believe it. It takes 6 hours now on straight interstate for me to get to New York City. And I mean, we're Buffalo. It's like we've got a good interstate system to connect the two biggest cities in the state, you know? So that's crazy to me that
Yeah.
6 hours my time, definitely. I could see a week in a wagon.
Yeah. But when you think about space though, that's a lot more of a that's like a bigger distance if you have to walk or ride a horse, you know?
Mhm.
Right, that's
Like I
true.
think cars really changed the way we think about distance, you know, where you're like, oh, this is only 5 hours, but like you're covering how many miles, you know, like probably 180 or something.
Right, exactly. No, I think it's well, now I'm gonna have to Google it because I really thought it was like 400.
Maybe it's 400. I don't know. I'm bad at math.
Again, Buffalo and New York City, not close. Polar opposites of the state.
I'm like, how big of a state is it?
6 hours and 20 minutes to get there. And go do 400 miles exactly.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's if you go through Syracuse. I bet you could probably shave like 50 miles off of it.
Yeah, but imagine going that far on a horse,
No,
Well, and then
no.
I'm
you
sure
know?
they didn't have
Saddle
roads
sore.
the way we
I mean,
know
that's probably
them.
like a couple of weeks worth of traveling, maybe. Like I don't know how far you can ride a horse.
Yeah, I don't know either. I have no horse reference.
Yeah.
We need a horse girl. Horse horse
We do
people,
know
please.
nobody here was a horse girl.
Please head over to our Discord channel and let us know. We
If
will
you
be
had to ride a
waiting.
horse.
We will be waiting for someone to answer that question for us.
Yeah, I don't know much about horse riding for traveling.
No, I love
Yeah, me
horses,
neither.
but no, I've never had to ride them that long.
But I have thought about it because when I watched the most recent Bridgerton and they were riding the horse for 140 years all the way back to the um town, I was like, how long can this horse go? And then they just left the horses in the rain. That really bothered me. Anyway,
Well, but they didn't actually leave the horses. It was a stable hand's job to go get the horses.
it's fine. Who was the stable hand? The two people that weren't even there?
I don't know who the stable hand is, but I'm telling you that families that had that much money paid people to go get the horse in the rain.
I would assume it
Still
was
haven't watched Bridgerton.
It's
I
a
Greta.
want
choice.
to. No, I need to.
It's good. I mean, I am a little done with, I told Karina this. I'm a little done with their like reuse of tropes every season.
Yes. They're
Okay.
very aggressive this season.
Yeah, the one that gets me most annoyed is the rakish man to the devout husband. They have done it every single season. Can't one man just keep it in his pants? Like the girls
Yeah, I
are
don't feel like Colin needed to go be a rake. I felt like they really pushed that one. They were like,
truthfully,
he's a hoe. Look at him be a slut.
I thought it was going to be Francesca's husband that wasn't going to be like that. But he then we found out also had premarital relations with people. And I was like, this man?
Randy
Not that
wants
he
her
wasn't
men pure.
attractive or anything. That's no shade to him. He was just like very quiet and you know, I just couldn't see
The
him
quiet
being
ones are
in
the
a
most
right
suspicious,
situation for
Randy.
that.
It's the quiet ones.
Whatever. I have hope for the youngest son now.
Well, he is growing. He's so young.
Little
He's
cotillion.
he's
So
so
cute.
cute.
So
Anyway,
cute.
okay, Randy, it's time.
Yes, it's my turn. Okay, so we're going to be covering a major act of genocide that took place during the Revolutionary War with the sole intention of eradicating Haudenosaunee nations. For clarity to our listeners, you have often heard the grouping referred to as the Iroquois Confederacy. For the nations this title represents, this is a pejorative term. I I watched some videos on this topic from their cultural center, and it was made very clear that it was a pejorative term to the nations, and it was given during a time of colonization. So because of this, we will be exclusively using Haudenosaunee to describe the indigenous peoples hailing from the Pennsylvania and New York regions. Okay? So this term encompasses the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, Cayuga, and Tuscarora nations who operate under the Great Law of Peace. This constitution-like agreement was an oral covenant that established rules of democracy amongst the nations and the integral role of women in their societies. This constitution influenced the US Constitution and its principles, but we can definitely see what they tried to keep out. So I asked no less than five people if they knew what the Sullivan Expedition or the Sullivan Clinton campaign or Washington's Indian Expedition was. And I didn't get one correct answer. Not that I blame any of them. This story has a very conflicting public representation and understanding when you do learn about it. It occurred in the midst of the Revolutionary War from May to October of 1779. At this time, central and western New York were locations of steady conflict. As you can imagine, the Haudenosaunee are being pushed out of their ancestral lands by incoming settlers with a very different culture and belief system. There existed a border between English lands and the Haudenosaunee lands that was being pressed more and more by the incoming white people. Upstate New York is highly coveted land for its rich planting soil and resources. So it is one of the most fertile grounds in the United States for planting. And so it was really hotly contested what those boundaries of the Haudenosaunee were. So Karina will be covering the Revolutionary War in more detail in the next few podcasts, but war was declared in 1776, raising tensions in this region between the Haudenosaunee nations and the colonists. The Haudenosaunee nations immediately declared neutrality, stating that the war was between brothers. Okay, they viewed this as a conflict between white people that they really didn't want to be caught up in. Neither of those brothers accepted that, as both wanted the allegiance of the Six Nations and didn't want the other side to have it. The indigenous would add bodies and expertise as well as land access for troop movement. By 1778, the nations were divided in their loyalties, with the largest of the nations placing their bets on the British to fulfill their current treaties and commitments. So the Haudenosaunee Confederacy had already made some agreements, some contingencies. They had worked with the British in the establishment of these colonies. So they were really hoping that the British would win because they knew without the British there, the Americans were not going to abide by any of the agreements that had already been established throughout the land. So it was really to their benefit if the British would have won, because in this case, the devil you know, right? Natives aided in one way, once their allegiances were decided, by leading raiding parties that would strike against the colonial settlers. Those nations were primarily the Seneca, Cayuga, and Onondaga, though all nations suffered as a result of these attacks. The events leading up to the campaign were a lot. There are a plethora of things said to be leading up to the Sullivan campaign that contributed to its kickoff, but the inciting incident kind of changes depending on what your perspective is. There's a split between how Pennsylvania views it. There's a split between how New York State views it versus the federal government versus the Haudenosaunee people themselves. For the modern day Daughters of the American Revolution in Pennsylvania, it's actually the Battle of Wyoming that is most pivotal in leading to Sullivan's campaign. It's a long-suffering dispute for Wyoming Valley along the Susquehanna River. In case you're wondering, yes, the state, Wyoming, is named in commemoration of this battle. For Pennsylvania, this event happening in 1778 was a point in the Revolutionary War where they found a vitriol for their native enemy. Patriots were ambushed by British with indigenous support, and somewhere around 300 men died, with very few, if any, losses on the side of the British or the indigenous. They then the Pennsylvania people labeled this a massacre, and newspaper articles were coming out that began telling the story of a massacre and slaughter of women and children, in addition to the men who had been ambushed. It was really a push and a viewing of the natives as savages. And it was the point where they really turned on their native neighbors. And for them, it directly led into Sullivan's campaign. In an interesting aside, I listened to a presentation by Dr. Andrea Lynn Smith about markers noting the campaign in any way. And this is one of the most marked events in the Revolutionary War in the entire country. And what she found in Pennsylvania is that a group of these markers were placed by the Daughters of the American Revolution in the 1800s. The markers are tied directly to the Battle of Wyoming, as they as the daughters were descendants of people who died in that battle. And so they have the markers referencing the Battle of Wyoming as a leading up to event that placed the blame for the Sullivan campaign on the natives. Never mind that it was wartime and that the British were the ones leading these campaigns. So for New York, it wasn't until the centennial celebration of the campaign that it was really named and highlighted. Their main push was the attacks on colonial settlers and the fact that some of the nations were assisting the British Army. New York came to know the event as the Sullivan Clinton campaign, and we'll talk about that later on when we talk about more modern day applications of this campaign. But their narrative of the campaign and its implications wouldn't really be defined uh, in textbooks or commemorated at the state level until 1929 for the 150th anniversary blowout. Now, I said that I was going to try not to center the colonial perspective. But I want you to understand the thinking behind the American aggressors and the justifications they used to rationalize this coming act of genocide. This was war, after all, and the natives and the British weren't the only ones attacking. In April of 1779, there was an attack on the Onondaga Nation. The Americans waded across the Onondaga Creek and began taking prisoners and killing natives as they came across them. So, if you were unfortunate enough to cross their path, they were either going to capture you or cut you down. They killed around 15 people, they captured 34, and they burned down 40 longhouses that homed multiple families. I say that because when we think homes, we need to remember that I am talking about the homes of the Haudenosaunee people, whose name literally means people of the longhouse. And longhouses house whole communities of people. You can have up to 40 people living in a single longhouse. So when we say that they burned down 40 longhouses, 40 times 40 would be the top number of, the top-ish number of people that could have been displaced by these destructive acts.
Well, and I'm sure those houses didn't take 20 minutes to build either.
Yeah,
Like now, it's not like they're going to be able to repair or fix any of this in enough
not
time to house everybody.
not in time to rehouse everybody. That's
Yeah,
absolutely true.
that's awful. I mean, not like anything that they've done up to this point has been great.
Yeah. Not not wonderful relations between the two groups. And this was technically the first march against the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It became the launching point for the Sullivan campaign. Once again, there is a plaque commemorating this on the north side of the lake. This became an ongoing part of an Onondaga oral history passed down through the generations every 17 years when the 17-year locust emerges. This happened because when the Onondagas returned to their lands, starving and freezing, they hear the locusts in the forest, which were regarded from as a gift from the creator and a source for the people. The Onondaga people are actually the only nation of the six that will eat locusts, and they do every 17 years in commemoration of this event. So, a true provision by the creator because that locust emerging is what got them through. In May of 1779, George Washington, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, wrote to Major General Sullivan outlining the objectives of the mission he was commissioning. He wrote devastation in no uncertain terms. The major excerpt from this correspondence used by, I'm not joking, almost every source that I found goes as follows. The expedition you are appointed to command is to be direct against the hostile tribes of the Six Nations of Indians with their associates and adherents. The immediate objects are total destruction and devastation of their settlements and the capture of as many prisoners of every sex and age as possible. It will be essential to ruin their crops in the ground and prevent their planting more. Now, I just want everyone to take a minute and reflect on the fact that this is the great George Washington to which everyone pins their moral fiber of the country.
Well, now I cannot sing that song from Hamilton with as much fervor as I have previously, Randy. But also, what the actual fuck is wrong with these people? I cannot handle any of this. Not only did they just destroy all of their homes and they're like, wreck it more, ruin every possibility of survival.
Yeah, they're pissed. I mean, George Washington's like, I need to not be dealing with them anymore. It was clear from his letter that he wanted the Haudenosaunee to be unable to maintain control of their lands. He wanted them punished severely enough to drive fear into the nation so they wouldn't retaliate. He wanted to open up the Haudenosaunee to future colonial settlement. He needed them gone. He wanted them broken. So his way to accomplish this was to drive the indigenous from their lands and destroy any food or belongings left behind. Most historians refer to this as a scorched earth campaign. Additionally, this campaign required a huge influx of money, which the Continental Congress did not have at the time. They were broke. It's giving broke. But they did it anyway. Um, because of course they did. And it took time. You know, one of my sources said that some of the villages required a stall in the marching of up to 3 days for the troops to be able to completely destroy the crops and the textiles of the villages. 3 whole days it took them to destroy everything that the indigenous people had for their winter. And the soldiers started calling it a weird war against vegetables. This campaign was the largest military force ever before gathered against the indigenous people of the Americas. A quarter to a third of the Continental Army was summoned for this endeavor. The original numbers earmarked 4,000, but more modern research shows there could have been as many as 6,000 Americans in a mix of duty-bound and voluntary, because people were volunteering to join this march, who participated in this act of genocide.
Randy, how does it keep getting worse?
Oh, yeah. And notice I moved on to calling it an act of genocide because that is what George Washington intended. Genocide.
He intended to eradicate people.
hmm Six whole nations. So from June 18th to October 3rd, this trek of ruin bulldozed over 50 Haudenosaunee settlements. As Washington had instructed, they should not merely be overrun, but destroyed. Despite their role in the British efforts of this war, aid was not provided to defend the native nations against the Patriots. So remember that bucket that they were putting their eggs in, saying, "Oh man, we gotta side with the British. They're gonna honor the treaty." They didn't honor their allies. I don't know why they would have honored their treaties. They didn't even honor their allies. Um, despite despite ample opportunity. So a week in April and 4 weeks in September, most of the fields and homes were reduced to ash. A study in 1969 concluded that the effort destroyed 500 dwellings, and it's important to remember that those were not all single family homes. So if we were to think about it more in the terms of single family homes, they estimate it would be closer to 1,200 to 1,500 that were destroyed, and nearly 1 million bushels of corn. Other estimates say at least 50 towns and nearly and only 500,000 bushels of corn. So, moving north along the Susquehanna River from Pennsylvania, Clinton's. So, remember New York calling it the Sullivan Clinton campaign? This is Clinton, the other general that started out on the Pennsylvania side. His force merged with Sullivan's at the New York-Pennsylvania border. Sadly for the natives, there was an initial delay in the march due to supply issues and a lack of knowledge of moving across the land. Now, sadly for the natives, because this was the primary kicker for why the British didn't come to their aid. They believed that the stall meant that that the Americans were not serious about attacking the natives. They still should have sent troops. That was their ally, but they're allies for themselves. When they
Right,
did
yeah, they're
event,
not dependable
yeah.
people.
But and also like this is not small. This is not a small group of people. You could see them, you could hear them. The natives were sending the British troops who were in the state. I'm not talking about like they had to go to England to find more soldiers. They were in the state. They had their own area of the state. They were sending notes to them saying, "Come help us, please fight with us." And they just didn't come because they didn't think that the Americans were really going to attack. They refused to believe that the Americans were so well organized that they would put all of this contingency together to run the campaign.
I'm like, if you felt like they were a threat, wouldn't you even send allies? If you didn't think they were a threat, you would have sent somebody. You can't be like they're incompetent, but we got to keep our troops here.
Yeah, well, they just refused to believe that the natives were telling them the correct numbers. And then when they had the
Was it
delay,
because
they
they
were
were
like, "Oh, they're
native
not."
people?
Is it because what?
Because they were native people? Or they like, oh, they probably just can't count.
Count? I don't know. I don't want to think about it, but yes, probably. Why not? Let's just take racism to its natural conclusion.
The racist conclusion.
The racist conclusion is they can't count.
All I can think about is that the Americans were fighting a revolution and they put all of those resources into fighting the people that lived
hmm
on the
hmm
land.
Some
instead of
of
their oppressor. Like,
Some of the historians that I was reading said that there was a big pause on a lot of the revolutionary activities that happened because George Washington sent all of the people in this Continental Army up. There was like a pause in the Patriots' war effort side because they were like, "No, we're gonna go take these people off the face of the earth first. They're causing too much havoc."
I
for
was gonna say
years. Oh,
there's a lot. There's actually quite a few books about like the East versus West, side of the war and like what's going on further inland. And there's a lot of academic stuff basically saying that like people in the West, like in, what they would call the backcountry, saw this as an opportunity to just like drive people out of there. So it's not even just like the military, it's everyday people too, who are like, now's my time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a note that I found that the Revolutionary War was a bit of a land grab in a lot of places, and it did not seem like people were discriminating against who they were grabbing that land from.
Yeah. Patrick Griffin has a good book called American Leviathan that's all about that.
Okay, we'll have to put that in the
Yep,
note.
because there has to be a book.
Um, so when the British did eventually send people, they sent 600 individuals. The Americans had come and gone. Um, yep.
wow. Wow.
hmm Sullivan carved his path north into New York, while another contingent of the army was tasked with going into Pennsylvania and the Onondaga lands. This noise that and the size of the army, obviously they create a lot of noise. This noise actually helped lessen the loss of life in this campaign. There are in direct conflict, there are estimations of only about 50 to 150 natives actually dying in the Sullivan campaign simply because they were able to hear the army marching toward them, which alerted the scouts, which then alerted the villagers who were able to flee. This came at the loss of all but what they could carry. In Seneca history, this campaign was considered a whirlwind of mass destruction. The war chiefs wanted to fight, however, and developed a plan to ambush the Americans and fight them face to face in the English way. Now, why they decided to do that, I'm not entirely sure. But that is what is documented as what happened. And I'm going to say that again because this was British documentation, so we'll give it 50% truth. On August 29th, the American troops descended upon the ambush site, but were aware of the presence of their targets. So they circled the natives. So they decided to engage the front of this ambush while sending other troops to the back. They circled the natives and the British, and it wasn't long before that middle group was looking for a reprieve. Despite the American vice closing, the natives with the British in tow were able to escape the impending doom. This was known as the Battle of Newton. Remember that name. Not without a list of casualties, but it was successful for the Americans in one main way. The initial resistance had lessened significantly. So the natives, after this Battle of Newton, were much less receptive to any ideas of standing up and fighting for their land. They were surviving, I guess, at this point. By September 1st, the Patriot troops had reached Seneca Lake and were busy destroying the homes and communities of the natives. even as they remarked on the order and complexity found in these villages that rivaled or surpassed city planning of their own communities. So they were like walking in saying, "Oh, wow, I like these digs. This looks good." And then they destroyed it. Come September 9th, all major settlements in the area had been razed, and a scouting party was sent to one of the largest villages left. The 26 men on that mission were killed and became the only American casualties of the campaign. Comparatively, not a great loss to how many the Seneca and the other groups would lose in general. Individually, also not a great loss. I don't really care about these men dying. After continuing the destruction as far as the Genesee River, on the belief that there were no villages past that natural boundary, the Americans turned homeward, but continued to cut a path of destruction. So on their way back down, they were like, just in case we miss anything, we're gonna go ahead and take care of it. They returned, having found victory in the scorching of the earth, but they did not have any native captives, and they definitely did not ensure the end of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The nations had fled west and then north to the fort of Niagara, where Sullivan's men declined to continue. Remember, they just thought that there was no one left after the other side. They did know about Canada, but there was no reason to further engage the British. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy looked to the British fort for aid and ran to their location in the hopes of gaining food and shelter. They counted at over 5,000 indigenous people. Some reports put it at as high as 9,000. The British were not prepared, okay? They were like, nope, you are not welcome here. They were at that fort, they were already harboring hundreds of other loyalists from the Revolutionary War, and their supplies were tight. The indigenous people were camped out on the perimeter of the fort for the winter, having fled their homes with few belongings, little food, and mostly on foot. As has come to be a regular occurrence in my stories, I'm not really sure how this lines up. The winter of 1779 to 1780 was one of the hardest winters on record through modern time. Okay? It even 250 years later, they're still like, yep, that winter sucked. It was known as a polar vortex winter, with snow falling so deeply that the animals were dying in their tracks, unable to move through the snow. Living in the area and knowing what buffalo gets, it makes me shudder to think. Honestly, it does make me shudder to think what the Haudenosaunee people were doing outside of the Fort of Niagara. I mean, their longhouses could have withstood that. They wouldn't have been happy. There might still have been disease, those things that happen when you're like stuck inside with people, but they would have had a fighting chance, you know? If the snow was so deep, like think about having a tent and being stuck basically inside an igloo because there's no way to get out because the snow is so deep. That's like where are you going to the bathroom? How are you getting there's just it's really hard for me to comprehend the level of discomfort and pain that they were in that winter. Harsh conditions, um, starvation, exposure led to an estimated half of the population dying over the winter. So, what the Americans couldn't kill outright, they choked to death. When the spring came, the Haudenosaunee were desperate to move on and settle somewhere with more protection from the elements. They moved south out of Canada, but would be reliant on the British for the next few years to secure food and supplies as they rebuilt their homes and their storehouses. So we close the book on that. But as it always goes, there are conflicting accounts on who benefited, right? Or on what the results were after this campaign. The settlers would have you believe that the indigenous people fled their lands, and in the aftermath, white settlers swooped in to claim territory. That isn't a complete picture of the situation. I'm not going to say it didn't happen in areas, but there was more to the end result. So, in the end, the Haudenosaunee people returned to the Finger Lakes region with a vengeance. Okay, with a vengeance. They began to rebuild in their ancestral homes, and the attacks Washington hoped to quell redoubled upon their return. The American campaign had galvanized the indigenous people and pushed anyone who was in the neutral zone to join against the invasion of what would become known on the American side as Manifest Destiny. So in 2018, historian Colin Colloway wrote The Indian World of George Washington, in which, and this is my book reference, in which he counts up the attacks made after the attempted genocide. He states that the Iroquois had no choice, and honestly, 2018, he should have known better and put the Haudenosaunee, had no choice but to fight on. Come spring, they resumed their raids on the American frontier, looking for food and vengeance. According to John Butler, who was his source that he was referencing, 59 parties totaling almost 2,300 men went out from Niagara between February and September of 1780 alone. Okay, so this was just directly after. They killed 142 Americans and took 161 captives. They destroyed two churches, 157 houses, and 150 granaries, drove off 247 horses, and 922 head of cattle. In those few months between February and September. So they were out there getting their own supplies back from the people that were left. They were out there getting food in these raids. Um, they were mad. You know, the story of American aggression and destruction continues through the oral histories of the natives as well. Other than the locust eating, which I mentioned earlier, the Seneca began to call George Washington Hanadagayas, meaning the town destroyer, and that is now the word they use for every president. So that word means is the presidential title, but it means the town destroyer. There is also speculation at the rewriting of this history to justify Manifest Destiny and the taking of indigenous lands. It is a misdirection that the nations were driven out of their homelands completely during the campaign, and it was left open for colonial settlement. The Haudenosaunee returned and rebuilt the area, and it wouldn't be until the 1800s where large swaths of land were stolen and they would be driven out again to their um, reservations. In the 1920s, there was an ongoing trial on a major land claim issue. A New York commission that held hearings to settle disputes and to determine if the Six Nations in the Confederacy are under federal oversight, they were put together. The leader of the commission went to the Haudenosaunee to learn about their treaties before returning and investigating the paperwork. Okay, so he went to the Haudenosaunee. He was like, we have to decide if you're under federal law. Tell me why you think you're not. Like, give me the justification. So they go through the treaties. He comes back. He looks at the paperwork. The more he looks, the more he finds. Despite the treaties, the speculators and political leaders made dozens of illegal land agreements over the 1800s. He determined that 6 million acres of New York were misappropriated. Now, despite efforts to cover this up, news articles did get a hold of it, and one of the news articles was titled, "Is White Man's Title to More Than 6 Million Acres of One-Time Indian Land in New York State Threatened?" And I'm just like, I think you're missing the point here. I think you're missing the whole point here. But unfortunately, Everett was a lone leader. He submitted this report without the support of his commission, and it was kept undercover by the legislature as best they could. As you all can guess, in our illustrious American culture, this event, the Sullivan Campaign, has been commemorated for centuries, and that celebration continues to this day. One of the most notable remembrances was in 1929 at the 150th anniversary, within the commemoration of the Revolutionary War. As early as 1923, a group was put in charge of outlining ideas for the state's celebration of the Revolutionary War. So Sullivan's expedition covered so much ground and entered across multiple New York counties, of course, because he went on a whole, raise the ground to nothing. But they thought that it would give the state a lot of opportunity to educate the youth and instill patriotism. Because it went across so many counties, they would be able to do tons and tons of events. However, the Indian Expedition, as it was known at the time, was not viewed super favorably. This is the inciting incident for New York, renaming it to the Sullivan Clinton campaign, two very steady, strong, famous New York generals. They had decided to do a full reenactment of the Battle of Newton. Remember that battle I told you to remember? Yep. They did a full reenactment in 1929. They had a massive marching pageant that took place in 3 different locations and included more than 20,000 people marching as if they were in the Sullivan campaign. They claimed that it wasn't to revive old hatred or to gloat, and decided to invite the current Haudenosaunee leaders to be involved in plaque placement and parades. He didn't get many responses. Now, can we please pause for the audacity of a white man?
Randy, what? What?
It's about to get worse, Karina.
No, why would you do no?
I
You
just like
know
how
what? I
someone
can't
was
blame
like,
Randy.
guys, it would be a good idea? Let's invite them.
Yeah. And you're gonna see why this is even more stupid. It's even a worse idea to invite the Haudenosaunee. So the New York Commission that we talked about, that Everett had like done this whole thing, basically been like, that land isn't yours to the government. They had already voted before that had happened. They had voted to return land to an Oneida family in 1920. So there was some precedence for people returning the land once they had found out that it was illegally obtained. So that was one of the reasons why that report was so terrifying to people, was because there was a precedent that had been set that the natives would be given their land back. So by 1925, the Haudenosaunee file a suit against the state for these 6 million acres. This is happening right alongside the plans of the state government to promote the celebration of the Sullivan Campaign. The appeals and additional suits were being litigated, while the commemoration committee erected or assisted in erecting plaques across the region. The request for involvement from the Haudenosaunee for the war ceremonies were coming also while they were erecting plaques and working to fund the lawsuits. So in May of 1929, the nations ran out of money and opportunity to further push the claim to their land, which is really unfortunate. And actually, the more stories that I tell, the more that you'll hear that funding is a huge issue. The government does, in fact, bury you in paperwork. Um, but for a group that didn't want to revive old hatred or said they didn't want to gloat, they sure put both their feet in that stinking pile of shit, didn't they? They were like, we're not going to read anything. We're going to stay out of the news, but we're going to pretend like you're not fully evolved people who might be mad about this situation.
I literally cannot sit here and listen to the story you just told, Randy, and be like, I'd love to commemorate that. That just was like, wow, that was our bright and shining moment. Let's you like and then later be like, you guys don't want to come to that?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like a
Yeah.
place you live. It's like
Yeah.
you know this
Where your
land.
ancestors are buried, where your great grandparents are buried,
Yes.
where you have your ceremonies and your religion is tied to the land. What I what I will also say is I think it's crazy for people to say things like, "Well, where would they go? They live there now, where would they go?" No one asked that question when the land got taken. I don't think we should ask it now. It's none of my business. That sounds like something that isn't my business.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm gonna take my stuff. I'll go. It's fine. I literally they wanted to eradicate them. Imagine though if you know what, and that's the thing. I was like, if money was not an issue, and I was like, no, I don't think that even if the native people had all their money, they would not do the things that the colonizers did to them.
It's
They
true.
would not retaliate in the
And
same
to be
way.
honest with you, I would doubt very much that most indigenous communities would ask that now. You
Right.
know what I mean? I don't think that that's what that that would be
They
their
just
top
want to go
priority.
home.
Yeah.
It's that was rough, Randy, but I also
Well, I'm
like you
not
gave me
done.
hope. Oh, there's
The
more.
shit continues.
Great.
This is my last paragraph, I swear. But every year to this day, there are reenactments of the campaign that focus on and highlight the savagery of the natives. Even this year, on the brochures for the 2026 commemoration, there is the commemoration of the Battle of Wyoming. There is intense imagery of scalping and natives as the bad players, while these white men are running around in the background tearing at their hair and crying. I kid you not, I stared at this picture with such animosity. It was the most ridiculous picture I'd ever seen. Anyway, despite this constant and unrelenting reveling in an attempted genocide by our founding fathers, the Haudenosaunee have continued to live and endure, and in some instances thrive. There are multiple cultural centers across the state that depict the facts of the American invasion and continued oppression faced by a government that sees their existence as a nuisance. They maintained aspects of their culture and language, even though many other atrocities that would come their way in the future really tried to stop that. I think this story is a testament to um, some of the historians call this an issue of memory wars, where what do we remember versus what actually happened. I think this is an interesting case of even what's documented isn't what they, the PR campaign is. You know, like even by the American Patriots' own documentation, they didn't succeed in anything that they were trying to do. But they still like commemorate it every year. So it was just a really interesting perspective, and I think really talks to the cognitive dissonance that this country morphs and bends itself into to be the good guy. Okay, that's it. Now I'm done. Karina
So
looks very unhappy.
I've been very distraught this whole time. So whenever I was researching one Randy, every single time I go, oh, I want to do that thing, and then I look on our sheets, and then I'm like, oh, Randy's already doing it. Okay, never mind. That's and it's always like the biggest event that's happening that in that time. Anyway, and so I had seen the Sullivan Expedition in passing. I had no idea what it was. Like my remembrance of the Revolutionary era is like 1779 is important, and that's all I know, right? Like I don't know a ton. And also we don't know what's happening in each individual state for the most part. So I thought the Sullivan expedition was like a nice little trip. I don't know, like I thought they were going to go on a trip and there was going to be some cannibalism. That's what I thought that was going to happen.
Like they're exploring and they just run into trouble and
And they're like,
people eat
gosh darn it,
people.
we got to eat Jimmy. Yeah,
To
like
Yeah.
be
that's what I thought.
fair, that's what the Franklin expedition was when I covered it. Like
Right.
I
Well,
That
most of the
yeah,
time you hear expedition, they're like they go on a
adventures.
journey.
Yeah.
And this was like there was something that happened and it was genocide. It was horrible.
It was
But
attempted genocide. It
well,
was
yes, you're right.
really poorly
It was
performed
a
genocide.
genocide plan on the part of
I think the
the
important
founding
here
fathers.
part here is the intention. Thank you for saying it,
I think
Karina.
that's important. I
hmm
think
Yeah.
that's what they did. They didn't go into it hoping that like some of them would survive and come back, which I think speaks to the resiliency of the native people.
100%.
Yeah. And like they and then also the sitting outside of the British fort is heartbreaking. If you're gonna say that you're gonna be an ally, you have to be an ally. You can't just be an ally when it's convenient for you.
Right? That's really the thing.
Yeah.
To not send aid and then when we're fucked to be like, we can't help you now. That feels real wrong.
Randy. No, but really it was like, oh, we're gonna send you help. They've already been gone. Everyone's already moved on, and they're like, let's send the people now. Disappointment. But I do like that the people came back and they're still fighting to come back home.
Yeah. I feel like I don't put that in enough because that is usually the story. Like,
Yeah.
unless I end it with, like, they were completely destroyed, and that so rarely happens. That is one of the hardest parts about talking about Native history is that people always want to talk about the lasts of all of it, right? Like everyone
Mm-hmm.
thinks that what everything I'm talking about is the last. And then they were dead, and then they were done, and then they were gone, and the white people made something on the bones of, you know, their enemies. But that doesn't really go with how the historical context goes. Like a lot of the nations across the country are still there, not in those great numbers, but if the federal government would get off our backs, maybe we could do a little something more with it. But I'm gonna try to include it. The reason why I don't normally include that in the end is because I feel like so often when we do talk about Native Americans, all their focus is on is, oh, well, it's not happening anymore. Like very much like say, slavery. So like so move on, move past it. Like why are you still focused on it? Why are you still talking about that? That didn't happen to you. You know what I mean? And I get angry because we can be upset if we want to be upset about it. You know what I mean? Like, we can tell the story of devastation and make you sit in the discomfort of it without telling you that we're still alive. Like, maybe I want you to think we're dead for a hot second if it makes you really connect with the story, you know? But I don't want to deny their existence. So I will be trying to include that more.
I love that, Randy, as we should.
Greg, you've been so quiet tonight.
I
I
Hey,
want
I'm
to
know.
hear
sorry.
your
My
thoughts.
my kids have been in the background, and so I've been like listening to hear if I have to like go intervene, you know. Um, no, it's interesting because the the American Revolution isn't my main thing within what I do, but then also like this stuff I've read a lot of the bigger works by like you mentioned Colin Calloway and some of these other people. I've read a lot of these works that are about indigenous perspectives and like what's going on in the indigenous world during this and how does the war impact that. But it's definitely more like big broad brushstrokes and not like that level of detail with the Sullivan campaign. Like probably like one of the biggest books in like academic like Native American history is by this guy named Richard White called The Middle Ground. That's all about how like the Ohio River Valley, like the Great Lakes area after like in the wake of the war becomes this like refuge or even during the war like becomes this refugee zone basically where there's people who are displaced and like like fleeing the violence that's going on and so like he studied that area and the politics and like what's going on in there and it's like probably like the biggest book in like academic history on indigenous people since the 1990s. But like that tracks with like your story and like that's like just one of these many forces that's like pushing people out, and destroying their homes and turning people into refugees. Like when we think
Hmm.
of modern wars, we think of people who are driven out, in conflicts, and like casualties who are innocent people who are like getting hit in these attacks and stuff like that, and that was going on during this war. And of course, that's like you were saying, Karina, like not like the patriotic story that we hear growing up, because like we don't want to think that this war created like suffering and pain and displacement for so many people.
I was reading that the Revolutionary War each year like had a different flavor to it. I I have not been I have not ever been this familiar with the Revolutionary War, to be quite honest with you. I'm not one of those, like when I think about history, I don't go to the wars. That's not what I'm drawn to. But I do wonder how much fluctuation there was in like thinking and culture and all of that during this war. Because again, one of the and I brought this up before, but one of the things that I really like to sit and think with on when I think about the founding and the coming together of the United States is how radically different each one of these colonies are from each other to to come together in the first place to fight against the British is kind of astounding. It's truly astounding that they were able to do it. Like Karina's covered a bunch of founding stories. I've covered a few. The societies are really, really different. So I can imagine when you talked about it, Greg, being a civil war within the war, that makes 100% sense because
Mhm.
these people would be jostling in line for like what's acceptable, what are we going to accept, what are we not, what are you going to have to give, what am I going to have to give? I don't want to give that. I'm not ready to. I can just see that like settling that would be forced during something like a Revolutionary War when you're trying to bring everyone together to fight. It's just I've never been more interested in learning about the Revolutionary War than I am at this time. And that's what I think is so great about doing this podcast with you guys.
I agree. And what I was just thinking about is tying it to like the outlaw portion of it. It makes sense that there was this chaos with the all the leaders have their own missions that they want to accomplish. And there's just all these teams and you don't know who's going to win out in the end. So it really is just a chaotic time of like the what is it? Like the British normal people, colonizer people are just like trying to live their lives and also trying not to get assaulted because they aren't thinking the right way. Because regardless of what team you're on, there's some chaos happening to you. And then, or you're a soldier fighting for some side, or you're just an indigenous person trying to make it and try not to get murdered after your house has been burnt down. The state of New York is a chaotic mess during 1779. It's wild.
It
I
is.
like what was happening in the rest of the world. I mean, in the rest of the colonies.
Right. I
Like
like I
like
can't
when
even
I think of the
imagine.
like you keep saying, Karina, when I think of the Revolutionary War, you're right. I immediately go to Boston. I'm
Yeah,
like, the seat of the Revolutionary War was in Boston,
I am
and
Benjamin Franklin.
sometimes I think about Philadelphia.
I
Like
literally always
that's
think
it.
Benjamin Franklin. That one picture of them signing the form, that's what I think. It's like,
Right.
Hmm.
Like
that's
that's
the
all I
only
got.
thing.
I see ships, I see a bell, I see lanterns and candles in my windows. Like that's what I picture when
Wigs.
I think the Revolutionary War.
Right, but you forget there's like people dying all the time. And it comes back to that thing, Randy. The more in depth I learn about war, the least the like less I want to learn about war.
Hmm.
Like it's relevant to the story and we have to get through it, but like I do not understand the war fanatics. I'm gonna say it right now.
I
Hmm.
was talking with one of my coworkers about this the other day because she was talking, because she does more Civil War era, or she does slavery in Arkansas, like specifically, that's her research area. And we were talking about that, and she was saying with the war, she's just like, there's so much more going on, right, than just the fighting, and like there's people that just hyper focus on that and like ignore everything else. Which I
Why?
also don't get. Like, I teach the American Revolution, and my students get really mad because they're like, "You don't really talk that much about the battles." And I'm like, "The battles are really not the most important thing here. Like, we could read a book about all the military engagements, and you would hate it. I promise you. Like, they would be your least favorite book, you know?"
I I just don't get it. I mean, I just don't get it. I really
It's not
don't.
for me
It
to
isn't.
understand.
One of the kids came back from school today with a book on military weapons, and he was so excited because it was like recently published, so it had like the most up-to-date information. And I was sitting in the car thinking, I would never pick that book up. Like this could be the end of days. It could be an I Am Legend situation where I'm just walking around picking out what I'm doing from Barnes and Noble or the library or whatever. I would never pick that book up. It would have never been touched.
No, I agree with you. I would be like, I'm okay with not putting that in my brain. I'm all
Because
right.
every time he read it, I was like, did that need to be created? Did we need to make that?
It's not for me. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Randy. I don't
What'd you
know.
say?
It was very conflicting feelings, but it was history I needed to learn.
The more you know, the sadder you can be.
Oh God, great. Great. I love it. Well, if you love being sad, come back. It gets worse.
It gets worse. That's a new sticker.
It does every time, Randy, you just
It
kept
gets
you
worse.
every sentence was just like, oh,
I know. I felt bad when I told you you needed to hang on so I could really drive the final nail in.
Yeah, it's
typically,
like at each.
oh, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like at each point, I was like, "Wow, that's like a terrible note to end on." You're like, and then you like keep going, and there's more.
And then it was worse.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I typically try to go to something like more nice, like less. I always know that with you, I'm going to feel a lot of feelings. And so I try to find something that's like, well, that's neat. Anyway, if you have any suggestions on what we should cover, because I found somebody had suggestions on YouTube. I'm terrible at the comments, but I will be better about it in the future. But if you enjoyed today's episode, have comments or questions, concerns, please find our website and we will for sure get back to you. It is sippinsaga.online, where we have merch, our Discord membership opportunities. Anything else you would like to bring up, Randy? Oh, a book club. How could I
Yes,
forget?
who can forget the book club? I love it. We're actually having great conversations on Discord with the book club. Somebody was throwing out a quote. I'm much better on the Discord. I don't watch the YouTube, our YouTube channel, but if you guys comment on the Discord, will be commenting back. But it was really good. We were having a good little exchange of words.
I love words.
I love them too.
Instagram is the one that I will check, but I'm trying. YouTube is the
We're
thing
gonna
I
get
don't
there.
understand. Yeah, it's a journey. But thank you so much for listening and joining us on the stories of today. But for now, we gotta go. So, bye.
Adios.
Bye.